I put my key in the front door but it didn't turn. A second later my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. The locks are changed. You don't live here anymore. Let's see how tough you are now. 2 days later their lawyer emailed me. We have a problem. Call immediately. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 26 and I just graduated from college. Like a lot of people, I thought moving back home for a short time would help me get on my feet. Rent is expensive and I figured my parents would be proud that I finished school. I walked up to the door expecting comfort, but instead I found a lock that no longer worked for me. I called my mom right away, still thinking it had to be some mistake. She answered with a sharp laugh. I told you, Ethan. You don't live here anymore. Be brave now. In the background my dad muttered, "Good. He'll finally learn." The words sank into me like ice. These weren't strangers. They were my parents. Yet they sounded almost pleased to see me stranded. I set my bags down on the porch and stared at the door I'd walked through my whole life. Inside were all the memories of my childhood. Birthdays, holidays, even the nights I had studied at the kitchen table. Now it was locked against me as if I was a trespasser. That night I had nowhere to go but my car. I parked in a grocery store lot, trying to convince myself I could handle it. But the truth was I felt broken. It wasn't only about losing a bed to sleep in. It was about losing any illusion that my parents cared. The texts my mom sent played in my head again and again. It wasn't just rejection, it was meant to humiliate me. And as I sat in the dark, I realized that nothing between us would ever be the same. Growing up in the Walker house felt like walking on eggshells every single day. My parents never raised a hand to me, but their words cut deeper than anything physical could. If I brought home good grades, my mom would point out how my handwriting was sloppy. If I scored a goal in soccer, my dad would remind me I missed 2 others. Nothing I did was ever enough. My sister Madison, on the other hand, could do no wrong. If she brought home a B on a test, they celebrated with ice cream. When I brought home an A, they asked why it wasn't higher. Madison got her first car at 16, a shiny used Jeep that my dad proudly presented in the driveway. I rode the bus until I graduated high school. Even when I landed a small scholarship for college, my mom brushed it off and said, "Well, it won't cover much. Don't think you've really achieved anything yet." Meanwhile, Madison's art hobby got framed on every wall in the house. The worst part wasn't the unfairness. It was the way they made me feel like I was only valuable when I served their plans. If my dad needed help fixing something, I was expected to drop everything. If my mom wanted the yard done, it didn't matter if I had homework or a shift at work. I was ordered to take care of it. When Madison had the same request, she was asked gently, like it was optional. As a kid, I tried harder and harder, thinking if I just worked enough, they would see me the way they saw her. But the truth became clearer with every year that passed. They weren't going to change. Their approval wasn't something I could earn. It was already given away to someone else. That pattern carved a hole in me. Every time I reached for a moment of pride, it was taken apart in front of me. Every time I thought I had done something that might finally make them proud, they found a way to remind me I wasn't Madison. By the time I was old enough to leave for college, I already knew that their love came with conditions I could never meet. It wasn't until I stood outside that locked door years later that all those memories connected. The rejection wasn't sudden. It had been building my whole life. That first night, I sat in the driver's seat with both suitcases crammed in the back. The streetlights outside cast dull yellow circles across the windshield, and every sound of passing cars reminded me I had nowhere else to be. My chest ached, but I forced myself to stay awake, replaying everything. I kept hoping it was some kind of twisted test and that, by morning, things would be different. When the sun rose, I tried calling again. My hands were shaking as I dialed because no matter what had happened, I still wanted them to say it wasn't real. My mom answered this time, her tone flat. I asked her why they would do this, why they would push me out with nothing. She laughed, short and sharp. "You always needed hand-holding. Now you'll have to grow up." I tried reasoning with her, saying I just needed time to get settled. She cut me off. "Don't start begging. We're done carrying you." Then I heard my dad in the background, his voice full of scorn. "If he can't figure it out, maybe he's not cut out for the real world." I sat there holding the phone long after the line went dead. My parents weren't just shutting the door on me, they were enjoying it. That stung worse than the lock, worse than the text. It meant they wanted me to suffer. The hours after that dragged. I drove around aimlessly, parking near coffee shops, gas stations, anywhere I wouldn't be noticed. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their words echo. Weak, dependent, useless. It would have been easy to let those voices crush me completely. But as the day wore on, something shifted. Anger bubbled up where sadness had been. If they wanted me broken, I couldn't give them that satisfaction. They thought I'd fold under pressure, that I'd come crawling back. I wasn't going to. Sitting in that car with nothing but my clothes and a thin bank account, I made a silent promise. They might have locked me out, but they hadn't ended me. One day I'd find a way to turn their cruelty back on them. I didn't know how yet, but the seed was planted. 2 days passed in a blur of exhaustion. I hadn't eaten much, hadn't showered, and my body ached from trying to sleep in the front seat. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, my phone buzzed with an email that made me sit up straight. The subject line read, "Urgent. Call immediately." It was from Charles Bennett, the attorney my family had always dealt with. I hesitated, unsure if I should even open it, but curiosity won. The message was short and direct. He needed to speak with me about a legal matter involving my grandfather's estate. At first, I assumed it had to be another cruel setup. Why would anyone in my family want me involved in something important? Still, I called the number at the bottom of the email. When Charles answered, his tone carried none of the coldness I had grown used to. Instead, he sounded uneasy, almost embarrassed. He explained that when my grandfather passed away, a property trust had been created. Land, investments, and a large home that had been in the family for decades. My parents had managed it for years, believing they had full control. But in reviewing the documents recently, he noticed something they had overlooked. My name was attached as the primary beneficiary. Legally, I wasn't just included, I held the majority stake. I sat in silence, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My parents had spent years treating me like I was nothing, yet here was proof that my grandfather had seen me differently. Charles said he believed my parents never told me because they assumed I'd sign whatever papers they placed in front of me, giving them everything. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now the oversight was too big to undo without my consent. Hearing those words lit something inside me. The same people who had locked me out and laughed at my pain were suddenly vulnerable because of a mistake they couldn't erase. For the first time, the balance shifted. I thanked Charles for being honest and told him I needed time to think. When I hung up, I leaned back against the seat, my heart pounding. The betrayal that had left me stranded was now circling back toward the very people who caused it. For once, the cracks in their control were showing, and I knew this was only the beginning. Charles asked me to come by his office the next morning. The building was small, tucked between a bank and a pharmacy, but walking inside felt heavier than I expected. He greeted me with a firm handshake, then spread a stack of folders across his desk. "These are the original papers from your grandfather's trust," he said, sliding the top one toward me. I scanned the lines, confused at first, until I saw my name printed clearly beside the words primary successor. My chest tightened. For years, I'd believed I was never chosen for anything, never trusted with anything. Yet here was proof that my grandfather had wanted me to carry on what he built. Charles explained that my parents had deliberately kept this quiet. From the beginning, they managed everything as if it belonged to them alone. They signed documents, collected income, and kept me in the dark. But legally, Charles added, they can't move a finger without your approval. Hearing that sent a rush of emotions through me. On one hand, I felt a wave of grief. All those nights I thought my family saw me as worthless. They were hiding the fact that I'd been given something meaningful, something intended to secure my future. On the other hand, anger mixed with relief, because finally they no longer had the upper hand. I flipped through the papers slowly, seeing my grandfather's signature, his careful instructions, and the dates. The truth had been sitting in drawers for years while my parents acted like I was disposable. My throat tightened as I realized how much effort it must have taken for them to keep this hidden. It wasn't neglect. It was intentional deceit. Charles leaned back, watching me process it all. "They'll come to you soon," he warned. "They can't manage any of this without your cooperation. Be careful. They'll try to manipulate you." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time since being shut out, I felt something other than despair. I wasn't powerless. I held the key to the very thing they valued most. That night, as I sat alone with the folders spread across my lap, a new thought took root. I didn't need to fight them head-on. I just had to let their own greed do the work. And for once, I had the chance to decide how the story would end. It didn't take long before the shift came. After weeks of silence, my phone lit up with a call from my mom. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. She asked how I was doing, if I was eating, if I needed a place to rest. The same woman who had laughed while locking me out was suddenly pretending to care. My dad followed soon after, leaving a voicemail that sounded almost rehearsed. He said things like, "Family sticks together," and "we shouldn't fight over small misunderstandings." The words felt hollow, but I understood why they were saying them. They needed something from me. When I didn't respond right away, the tone of their messages grew sweeter. My mom even suggested I come home for dinner, as though nothing had ever happened. I agreed, but only to keep the game going. On the surface, I acted hesitant, as if I might be convinced to forgive. In reality, I met with Charles behind the scenes, asking exactly what my rights were and how far their reach could go without my signature. At that dinner, I noticed the desperation in their eyes. Every smile felt forced, every compliment laced with calculation. My dad poured me a drink, my mom piled food onto my plate, and both of them kept circling the same topic: how complicated paperwork could be, how much easier life would be if I just let them handle things like before. Then Madison joined in. She leaned close and whispered that she had known about the inheritance for years. "They told me not to say anything," she admitted, almost smug. "It was easier that way." Hearing that from her cut deep, but it also clarified the picture. They had all been part of the lie. I kept my face calm, nodding, pretending I was considering their suggestions. Inside, though, the decision was already made. They wanted my trust to vanish with a signature. I wasn't going to give it. Every smile across that dinner table confirmed what Charles had warned me: their kindness wasn't real. It was a mask covering greed. And the longer I played along, the more tangled they would become in their own lies. I made my decision in silence. Without announcing it to anyone, I packed up what little I had and drove to the estate listed in the trust. The gates opened with a code provided by Charles, and for the first time in weeks I felt like I was walking into a place that was truly mine. The house wasn't just walls and furniture. It was proof that I belonged somewhere my parents couldn't control. I settled in slowly, careful not to contact Linda or Frank. Days passed before they realized what I'd done. When they finally showed up, their car screeched to a stop in the driveway, and they stormed out, red-faced and shouting. My mom's voice carried across the yard, demanding that I open the door. My dad slammed his fist against it, yelling about how I was ruining everything. When I finally stepped outside, their fury hit me like heat. They shoved papers toward me, insisting I sign. I didn't take them. Instead, I told them plainly that this property was mine by law, and they had no authority here. My mom's face twisted with disbelief, and my dad's shouting grew louder, but the truth was written in documents they couldn't erase. The more they yelled, the calmer I felt. I didn't need to match their anger. All I had to do was stand my ground. Eventually, I told them to leave. My voice was steady, even when my hands trembled behind my back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't obeying or apologizing. I was drawing a line. They left that day furious, but without my signature, their control slipped further. Bills piled up, debts they had hidden from me began to surface, and the projects they had been funding fell apart. I watched quietly as cracks spread through everything they had built. I didn't gloat, didn't call to rub it in. My silence was enough. Their empire was crumbling, and they knew I was the reason they couldn't stop it. All the years they spent convincing me I was powerless had led to this moment. Me standing in the very place my grandfather wanted for me while they stood outside with nothing. Word spread faster than I expected. At first, I only told a few close relatives the truth about what had happened. The trust, the lies, the night I found myself locked out. Their shock was immediate. My aunt nearly dropped the phone when I explained how Linda and Frank had tried to cover everything up. "I can't believe they did that to you," she whispered. "Your grandfather would be sick if he knew." Soon cousins, uncles, even old family friends began reaching out. They wanted to know if it was true that my parents had hidden my inheritance for years. When I showed them the documents Charles had given me, the anger shifted from disbelief to outrage. People who once admired my parents turned cold, refusing to excuse what they had done. Holiday invitations stopped arriving for them. Longtime friends who had shared barbecues and vacations no longer returned their calls. At family gatherings, they were treated like strangers. It wasn't me who cut them off this time, it was everyone else. The community they had always boasted about belonging to was slipping away, one person at a time. Madison didn't escape untouched. She had built her image around being the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. But when it came out that she had known about the inheritance and kept quiet, the admiration she enjoyed began to crack. People looked at her differently and she hated it. I saw it in her eyes the last time we spoke. Embarrassment mixed with resentment. For me, the change was overwhelming. After years of being dismissed, I finally felt seen. Relatives who once looked past me now reached out with support. Some even apologized for believing my parents' version of events all these years. Their validation mattered, but it didn't erase everything. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I still felt the sting of what had been taken from me long before the trust came to light. The scars weren't visible, but they were there. Years of being told I wasn't enough, years of fighting for scraps of affection. Even with the truth out, that weight didn't disappear. Vindication was real, but so was the damage. And while I finally stood in the light, I knew shadows from the past would always follow me. The last meeting happened in a quiet cafe on the edge of town. They had asked to see me, promising it would only take a few minutes. When I walked in, both of them looked different, tired, smaller somehow. The confidence they once carried had been replaced with worry etched deep in their faces. My mom started speaking first. Her voice trembled as she explained how debts were mounting, how investments were drying up, how the house they once flaunted was on the verge of foreclosure. My dad, who had never once admitted weakness, leaned forward and said plainly, "We need your help. Without you, we'll lose everything." For a moment I just watched them, taking in the irony of it all. These were the same people who had locked me out without hesitation, who had laughed when I begged for a place to stay. Now, desperation had stripped away their pride. I thought back to the words that had greeted me that night on the porch. Slowly, I repeated them aloud so they couldn't forget. "Let's see how brave you are now." The silence that followed was heavy. My mom's eyes filled with tears and my dad's jaw tightened, but neither of them could deny it. They had said it. They had meant it. They leaned closer, pleading that things could be different, that families should stick together when times are hard. I shook my head. "You made sure I wasn't part of this family the moment you shut that door." My voice didn't shake. I wasn't angry anymore, just finished. I stood up, leaving their words hanging in the air. They called after me, voices cracking, but I didn't turn around. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging. They were. And I refused to carry their burden. As I walked out of that cafe, I felt the final thread snap. Whatever control they once had over me was gone. They would face the collapse they created, and I would never again be dragged into it. Their cruelty had brought them to this point, and now they would live with the consequences. With the storm finally behind me, I began shaping a life that felt like my own. The estate gave me stability, but it was never just about the money. It was about finally having the freedom to decide who I wanted to be without strings attached. I used some of the resources to finish paying off my student loans, then invested carefully, remembering Charles's advice to treat what my grandfather left me with respect. For the first time, I wasn't starting from nothing. The house became more than a shelter. I filled it slowly, choosing furniture and colors that reflected me instead of anyone else's expectations. Friends visited, and their laughter echoed in rooms that had once been silent. It was strange at first, feeling welcome in a space that was entirely mine, but over time that strangeness turned into comfort. What surprised me most wasn't the sense of victory but the calm that followed. I didn't need to gloat or chase revenge anymore. Their downfall had happened on its own. What I needed was distance, and that's what I built into my new routine. Mornings with coffee on the porch, evenings reading without interruption, days spent planning for a future where I answered only to myself. Yet even in peace, the past lingered. There were moments when I'd remember standing outside that locked door, holding bags that felt heavier than they were. But instead of anger, those memories carried a different meaning now. They reminded me that freedom had come at a price, but it was a price worth paying. I came to realize something important. My parents' betrayal had forced me into independence faster than I thought I could handle, but it also cut the chain I had been dragging for years. Their cruelty in a twisted way set me free. And as I looked back on everything, the closing thought was clear. They tried to shut me out of a house, thinking it would break me. But in the end, all they really did was lock themselves out of my life. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away for good, or should I have given them one last chance? I'd really like to hear what you think, so share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and stay tuned for the next one.